welcome. I am Tamara, and today I'm going to walk you through all the steps that you need to know to be able to make this book sleeve here. It has a front pocket for notebooks or smaller little journals, and of course you can add some fun, colorful pens or highlighters in there. And then it has a nice zipper, and the zipper comes off the end here. That way you can fit in a good-sized book and you'll be able to get it past that zipper tab. I've made a whole bunch of these as trial runs, and I found that that was the biggest annoyance, was trying to get it past the zipper tab. So I made it a little bit longer. Now, if you've never ever sewn a zipper into a project before, do not be afraid. I know that you can do this. I'm gonna put a timestamp in the description down below. And that timestamp will bring you right to the spot where I walk you through how to add the zipper. Watch that whole process before you decide whether you can or cannot do this. I really believe that if you have sewn a few projects, you will be able to add a zipper to your project. And you're going to be so proud of yourself once you've sewn this. I promise you. I also have made a printable version of this pattern. Check out the description down below. However, everything in this video is going to be given to you. I'm giving you the cut list. I'm telling you what you need to buy. So if you don't want a printable version and you just want to follow along in this tutorial, you can make this. I will tell you everything that you need to know. So let's jump on in and get started. Oh, but first, let me just show you. I have a hardcover book in here. This is not, a normal book. And I have test run a bunch of different books within the book sleeve itself. So I think that it will fit most books. I've tried taller books. I've tried thicker books. I even tried my son's Bible, and it fit in here no problem. So I think that's important to note. And now let's jump on in to the tutorial. Cut the fabric for your outer layers at 13 inches high by 30 inches wide. If you do want to rough cut a different piece of fabric for your front pocket, then you could cut this at 13 inches high by 20 inches wide, which is what I have done. Then cut two pieces of lining fabric at 11.5 inches high by 9.5 inches wide. And then cut a third lining fabric at 9.5 inches high by 9.5 inches wide. And then if you are doing a separate piece of fabric, like myself, for the front pocket, rough cut that around 10 inches by 10 inches. You will also need some polyester batting, as well as a 12-inch length zipper or zipper tape. Now, before we move on to the quilting process, I do want to show you two samples that I made. This one here, I have polyester batting in it, and it is so nice and squishy and fluffy. This one I tested with a quilter's batting, and I prefer quilter's batting for a lot of my projects, but for this one in particular, it just did not give you that nice fluffy feel that a polyester will give you. So I highly recommend using a poly batting, and on round 2, if you're feeling extra confident, do 2 layers of the poly batting, and it'll give it such a nice floofy feel. I love the puffiness of this book sleeve. It just makes you want to hug your favorite book. So take your pieces of fabric that you need quilted, so your two outer pieces of fabric. For myself, that's the 13-inch by 20-inch. And then I also have a 10-inch by 10-inch owl that I want on my front pocket. If you've decided to just go with all the same fabrics, your piece of fabric will be 13 inches by 30 inches in length. Then just pin it onto the polyester batting. And I like to use what is called a Hera marker. You could also use a chalk pen or any other water-soluble marking pen. And I will mark 2-inch by 2-inch squares onto my fabric. So first I like to start with the long seams. So I will mark 2-inch lines apart all the way across. I'll take it to my sewing machine and I will lengthen my stitch length to about 3.5 millimeters. It's just a bit of a longer stitch length. It's a really nice top stitch. And I will sew along all of those lines. Then, taking it back on over to my cutting board, I will remark those opposite 2-inch lines, take it back to my sewing machine, and sew those as well. Now that your outer layers of fabric have been fully quilted, it's time to trim them down to size. So trim your front pocket at 9.5 inches high by 9.5 inches wide. And then trim your two back panels at 11.5 inches high by 9.5 inches wide. As you can see here, I did decide to switch the lining for my front pocket. So I've got these cute little teacups here, and now we are going to prepare our front pocket. So lay your lining fabric face down, so right sides together, to your quilted outer pocket, and then clip along that top edge, sewing a 1/2 inch seam allowance across that top edge. And make sure to switch your sewing machine back to your regular stitch length. Then flip your front pocket so that the lining and the outer fabrics are laying wrong sides together. Clip along that sewn top edge. Take it back to your sewing machine and sew a top stitch across that top edge. I like my top stitch to be a 3.5 millimeter stitch length, and the seam allowance is around a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Quick interruption here, just to say that if you are finding this tutorial helpful, I just ask that you hit that thumbs up button because that really does tell YouTube whether or not this is a good video to share. I greatly appreciate your support in that matter, and of course hit that subscribe button so you don't lose me here on YouTube. This particular book sleeve I just finished making, and I'm going to gift this one to my husband this Christmas. All right, let's keep on sewing. And now it's time to prepare our zipper. So if you want to use zipper tape, you definitely can. However, to make things simple for beginners, I'm going to be using a 12-inch length zipper. Now, zippers, when you buy them, they're called 12-inch lengths, but that's actually the length of the zipper teeth. There will be a little bit of extra on the left and on the right of your zipper that you want there. You will also grab a scrap piece of fabric and cut that scrap piece of fabric to be 4 inches wide by 2 inches high. And then you will fold it in half and give it a finger crease so you know where that half line is. You'll fold both of the short ends in a 1/2 inch, and you will also fold those side edges in a 1/2 inch because we want this little piece of fabric to tuck around our zipper end. Now that all of your creases have been made in that little zipper tab, tuck the end of your zipper into that halfway crease and then begin to wrap this around all of the edges, clipping it in place. And then you can take it to your sewing machine and sew another top stitch around the entire outer edge, making sure that your needle does not hit that little metal end of your zipper because that will break your needle. Now, this next step is optional, and I actually don't recommend doing it when you're working with a regular zipper like this, but if you are using zipper tape, I just wanted to show you that you would fold your little ends back and then just tack them in place. So just fold them back about 3/4 of an inch and tack them in place. If this is the first time you've ever worked with a zipper and you are using a regular zipper, I highly recommend that you skip this step. Now let's prep our pocket. So grab one of the quilted pieces for the back or outer side and just have a look at the top edge of it. Lay your pocket panel on top and see maybe if you like where the quilt lines match up better on one of the panels, or if you like the image that's showing up on the top edge. Choose which one you want. Clip your pocket in place and then just tack it down with a basting stitch. or a regular stitch is fine as well. And I like to start at the top end of my panel, and then I sew all the way around, and I'll sew at around an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You could get away with a 1/4 inch seam allowance as well, just something closer to the edge so that you're just holding that pocket in place. Now, before we start adding our zipper, we need to mark some lines on our front panel, the one with the pocket. So on the left-hand side, mark in a 3/4 inch marking. And then from the right edge, mark 1¼ inches in. Then lay your zipper face down along the top edge. So line up the zipper head with that 3/4 inch marking. And if you didn't tack those ends back, that's okay. That's actually easier. Let them line up with that top edge. Clip along the entire top edge, but then when the zipper hits that 1¼ inch marking, just pull the zipper end down and pin it in place. Then you can grab your lining, lay it right side face down, clipping it in place as well, and then take this entire thing to your sewing machine. Using a zipper foot will help you a lot in this process, and you will sew across that top edge. Before you start sewing across the top edge, you can reach inside and just zip away the zipper head if you'd like. I'll leave that up to you. And of course, when you get to that edge, that's the 1¼ inch, you're going to keep on sewing and you'll sew all the way to the end. You're just going to make sure that you're not sewing the zipper in all the way to the end. Now you can see how that zipper was installed. So it sticks up and out a little bit on that one end, which is perfect. Now lay the lining and the outer fabric wrong sides together, pin it in place, and take it back to your sewing machine, sewing along that top edge with a top stitch. And you can use a regular sewing foot for this. Now grab your other quilted panel and line it up along the top edge of that zipper. I like to flip it over so I'm looking at the zipper face down. This time, mark 3/4 inches from the right edge for your zipper to line up, and then the 1¼ inch to the left side of your panel to help you guide pulling your zipper down and out of the way. Then clip everything in place, throw that lining back on top, face down, clip it in place, and then sew across the entire top edge, once again using a zipper foot. Then grab that lining and outer fabric, once again laying it wrong sides together, and sew a top stitch across that top edge near the zipper. And now we are at the home stretch. However, right here, I make a massive mistake. This is something that you must remember. Open your zipper up halfway right now. Just do it. Please, trust me. Open it up halfway. Very important. Then, once you've opened that zipper up halfway, lay the outer layers together, facing right sides together, and the lining layers facing right sides together, and we are going to clip around this entire project. You'll tuck that zipper end on in and pin it out of the way, so of course you don't sew across that zipper. And as far as where the zipper is, your fabric will naturally want to lay facing towards the lining, and that's exactly what you want. So lay that fabric so that that little sewn edge by the zipper is facing towards the lining, and you can clip it in place. You'll clip around the entire project, but you do need to leave a 4-inch opening on the bottom of your lining fabric. I like to mark that with a pin instead of my clips to remind myself not to sew around that section. Take this to your sewing machine, and starting at one of those 4-inch markings, you will sew a 1/2-inch seam allowance around the entire project, ending at the other 4-inch marking. Do this starting and stopping with a back stitch. And now, before you turn it right sides together, you want to trim away some of the extra bulk. The bulk is in the corners. So just trim away the corners, but make sure not to snip across your seam allowance. Then you can pull this thing right side out. And of course, that is why it was so important for you to open your zipper up halfway. It is at this point that I discover I have not done that, and I finagle my fingers on into there and manage to open up my zipper. But that was a stressful moment in time. Another thing to note as you're turning your project right side out, sometimes your pocket lining will end up face out the way that you can see mine is, and you can just flip it so that your pocket is the correct way. Then reach on in and just gently push out those corners before clipping along the open edge of your lining and sewing that shut. Then push that lining on in, and another trick I do like to use if I find my corners still aren't as pointy as I might like is just using a pin and pulling some of the fabric on the corners on out to give it a bit more of a crisper cornered look. I hope that you enjoyed this lovely book sleeve sewing tutorial. And of course, if you want the printed version of this pattern, it is linked in the description down below. Let me know in the comments how many of these you plan to make this Christmas. I've got about 8 sewn so far, with probably another 4 in my future. I'm going to be busy, but I love it. I hope that you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.